Good. Okay, well, welcome to week 9. And hopefully we will manage to allocate some time to a bit of a discussion of possibly the alternatives that you have possibly chosen so far. And it would be nice to hear from each other and learn from each other, and also discuss the concerns or the difficulties or anything that needs clarification. Well, last week, I did a presentation of, I guess, of the assignment description, and it was recorded, and I share that. Oh, no, not this one. Yeah, if you go to the annotated bibliography page in the modules, assignments modules, you see that I have shared that. In case for those who want to listen to that again, or if they missed it, yeah, you can find the kind of a discussion of that assignment. I'll possibly cover a number of key aspects of that again. And also, yes, I don't know if and here, I guess everybody has seen this page, right? And the samples and the template, but you can also find them all in the other important document, which is of course the course outline, the extended course outline. And this extended course outline is highly critical. It has all the descriptions that you can find on Canvas, plus, depending on the topic that you choose, if you're a week 8er, option 1, week 8er, option 2, or week 9er, you can go to the related page and find a pretty long list of potentially useful resources that I have listed them under the titles of essential sources or recommended sources. Yeah, here are, yeah. So, okay, so this is again the research essay question number 3. I believe a lot of you are week 9ers. And we've got these 6 elements of what I call 6 elements, or 6 little questions that help you, that would help you to structure your work. Also use that as kind of a guidance in terms of strategizing your reading. So when you read your resources, you know what you are looking for, so you won't feel too overwhelmed by those parts of the literature that may not make perfect sense and they're too sophisticated. So you know that for instance, you're looking for any discussion of the values and principles and objectives that underpin your alternative and so on and so forth. So if you may remember, we call these 6 elements. And then, of course, here is the list of the essential sources, recommended sources. Maybe I have highlighted them yellow, the keywords in their titles, so hopefully help you to spend less time exploring them. So for instance, if you're interested in ecofeminism or eco-socialism, that can be easily detected here. You pick up 2 that make more sense to you, you feel they're more manageable, and you annotate them for this assignment, for the sake of this assignment, using that template that is shared with you here. The template, I'm trying to give you a bit of a guidance, but I don't want you to be too strict. So yeah, I mean, it helps you to understand where to put what. So the introduction, in 200 words, you give an overview of the alternative, and I think it's better to write that introduction in the end, because you can't really do that until you have already developed some ideas about the alternative. So you may start with annotating the first one, and then the second one, you may even write the conclusion, and then you go back and complete or write or complete your introduction. For the annotated bibliography, again, I've seen some people that they go online and find some information about how to annotate a bibliography, and they write back to me and then say, okay, you know, is this the way we have to annotate them? Well, those things that you can find online are for general purpose sort of things. They, for instance, when you do annotation of an academic piece of literature, you have to say what method they have used, what conceptual and theoretical framework they have used. And we're not interested in that kind of thing. We're interested in knowing that, you know, about the core ideas, you know, how this resource make us familiar with the alternative, especially in relation to those 6 elements. What are their findings? Are they focusing on examples, practical examples and empirical evidence most of the time? Or is that a pure theoretical discussion of the alternative? Is this is it filled with lots of arguments for or against the alternative, or maybe a mixture of both? So you want to give an idea to your reader how this resource actually make us familiar with the alternative, and how helpful or useful that would be. For the sake of course, our purpose is not general. The purpose is to write that case study essay in the end, addressing the 6 elements of it. These 6 elements are slightly different across the options. For instance, in the case of week 9 topics, this is about the ecological unsustainability of the system, whereas the other 2 options insist on social inequality and the demise or corruption of liberal democracy. Okay, is there any questions? Yes? Yes. Okay, that's a very good question. Yeah, I think you are telling me that it's time to update. Okay. No, you want to penalize it if you use the ones that are under the sources. And yes, that's thank you for giving that my attention. But it would be also nice. I mean, the literature has been growing fast, so I don't think it would be too difficult, for instance, for people to find something new. Yeah. So maybe oh, okay. No. I mean, I the recommended is recommended. So if you can find something better, please do that, and that also helps you to operate. Okay, thank you, Joe. Yes. Any other question? Yes.
Sorry, just at the bottom of the week 8 topic 2, it says that it's due next Wednesday. Which will be
no, it's Friday. This Friday. Is that? Okay, well, thank you. Oh, yeah. It's hard to always pick up on every everything that needs to be changed. Okay, yes, it's Friday, and if you go to the description online on Canvas, the due date for week acres is this Friday. For week niners is the end of next week, next Friday. But I understand maybe it's a little bit too small a window in time. So you can, if you need, I'm happy to give you maybe a couple of days of extension for week eighters. But for week niners is a bit tricky because we're getting too close to the deadline for the essay, and we want to make sure that we get some feedback on the annotated bibliography, which we hope will be useful for the essay. So you will incorporate the feedback. And also you can incorporate anything you put in the annotated bibliography in your essay. So this would be a stepping stone point.
I just want to ask, do you want us to go into actual examples that are used in the, and then draw them just in one?
You want to review the examples?
No, like in your text that you've chosen, like your article, if there's like, if they're using examples, do you want us to put them in as or do you just want us to keep on the two ideas?
Oh no, you can yes, you better mention that such and such examples have been discussed in this, and it can actually this can be an advantage.
Okay.
This can highlight the usefulness of the source because it gives us, and if you look at the list of the 6 elements, one of them is that if the alternative has been experimented on or experienced somewhere, so you can say yes, this resource actually can help us address this element about experimentation around that alternative. Yeah, if you look at those 2 samples from last year, I think they're not really very good, unfortunately, but they're good in terms of giving us the issues that we need to avoid. Especially both of them seem to have done not a very strong job when it comes to, I mean, one of them, for instance, international journal, okay, not this one. Oh yes, this one. For instance, this is not really an academic work, it's just a presentation at a conference or something. I'm not sure if that's even peer reviewed. Yes. So and towards the end, again, when you look at the conclusion, especially that conclusive statement is important. It's where you actually compare the two, and especially in terms of the elements, and say, well, this one covers this and this and these elements, the other one covers that and that and that element. Both of them fail to cover those elements, and that would indicate that possibly we need to look for external resources for the essay that would address those elements that are not covered by these two. So this way you show your awareness of how useful these sources are, and also their shortcomings. So if you look at the annotated bibliography, the template in that hint section, I'm saying that possibly you can write something like this. The first source that you mentioned, the author's name, for instance, clearly describes the values and principles of, this is hypothetical, of course, of the alternative, whatever the alternative is, but does not address the limitations and only briefly explains the strategies and the strengths. So what are those strategies as the strengths? Well, they will naturally appear in your annotation. Or you can mention them again here, of course. And the first source, however, makes a case for the feasibility of alternative by drawing on evidence, as you relating to your question, evidence or examples such as this and this, and elements of the researcher's equation in assignment for blah blah blah. So something like this that would you wrap up, you compare, you highlight their strengths, their usefulness, those aspects that help you because we want to be really purpose oriented. The purpose is to actually write an essay addressing those 6 elements. So I would write down those 6 elements, and that's why I have again highlighted the names of those 6 elements in the course outline. What was that? Yeah, you know, the core values, you know, see they are highlighted for you, so you take note of that, and keep it somewhere with you when you read. I normally use those as stickers, little stickers. I put the name of the element on it, and I stick it to where, you know, if I have the hard copy, of course, to where the value can be found, and then I get back and say, okay, I had a question. Yes, yeah. You should have some, yeah, definitely. That's fine. You can use first person. You can mention the essay because again, as I said, this is purpose oriented. Yes, we were not expecting every resource covers all the 6 elements because none of those authors were writing their articles or books to address our research question. So yeah, definitely it's natural not to find a source that would cover all these 6 elements. Possibly the closest source I know of that is pretty close in terms of these 6 elements, and you can find most of these 6 elements in there, is the next system reader that I have shared with you. Remember that we have, if you go to the modules, we have this Alternatives library module, right? Here you can find a lot of good sources. We have a dictionary of alternatives, the pluriverse thing that you can download a free copy. Again, we have access through the webs through our library website to this Next System Reader, which is published by the Next System project. We have the Routledge Handbook of Eco-Socialism. We have Babylon and Beyond, with some very interesting chapters. Yeah, but this book is possibly the closest because the advocates of those alternatives discussed in that book were approached by the editors, and they were given a kind of a template, and they were asked to write about their alternatives, addressing the elements of that template, which is pretty close to what we do. But the articles that we have listed in the course outline, they may not have been able to address all the 6 elements. And any other questions? Maybe before I start, maybe in 5-10 minutes, we share our ideas with each other, you know, what alternatives we've been working on. I hope everybody has already started at least reading or writing. So some people have already submitted something, but I would like to insist that you don't need to wait until the deadline. So if you want to get our feedback as soon as possible, please, and if you can manage, please submit as soon as you can. But the problem with Canvas is that I have allowed multiple attempts, I think 4 attempts, so you get an idea about the similarity index, and then if the similarity index is high, you can rework and then resubmit. But it does not give us any indication if what you have submitted is the one or not. That's the problem with Canvas. So until when the deadline comes, then and you haven't applied for extension, then we consider that submission as the final. But if you're submitting earlier than the deadline, please let us know. Just drop a line, an email this is the final. I submit it, and then we will start marking. Okay, just let us know. Otherwise, we won't know. And we have to wait until deadline comes. And we have 2 deadlines, remember, for one assignment. So Canvas doesn't allow us to have 2 deadlines. So it's just I have to change the deadline for week 9. For week 9. At the moment, the deadline is set up for 5th of May, which must be this Friday, right? Okay. Again, for week 8ers, I'm happy to give maybe a couple of days of extension. There are not that many of them, I believe. But again, week 9ers, I guess they have some time to work. Okay, how about we start with you quickly? Alternative.
Marxist feminism.
Marxist feminism.
Yeah.
Okay.
And mainly focusing on how, like, the 20s of like how it's used as a framework by some like revolutionary groups like Philippines and things like that.
Okay.
And how it's also used a framework of how reorganize those foods and things like that. And what possibly how you could how that could be a capitalist option.
That's the core. Yeah, that's the core of the question. And have you found your resources? I'm not sure if I have enough.
Yeah, I've found a few, but
If the list of recommended sources doesn't have the sources related to your alternative and you have found something, please check them with me. Okay, I should be able to help. Okay, and I'm more than happy to help. And if you're struggling to find proper sources, I'm again happy to help with that. Okay, we want to save time and for more reflection on the subject. For you, the alternative you're working on.
So I've been working on degrowth.
Okay.
So far I've just looked at a couple of the sentences from the recommended and the essential one.
Okay. Are you happy with it?
Yeah, same problem as you mentioned before.
Yes.
They're about a decade old.
Yes.
That they're
Yes.
fine.
Yeah,
that's
that's
I might have a look for something more contemporary.
That would be nice. Yeah. Okay.
But I found particularly the one of the essential sources that
I also find that you and I share them on the report.
what is degrowth source? Was really useful as it covered the core values and the strategies really well. Especially just as like a little primer, if you don't like, if you're not familiar with the system, like it gives you a good base to start from.
Oh, that's good. That's good, especially for these assignments because it's the stepping, it's the first step. Okay, yeah.
So I'm doing Trotskyism, which isn't from the list of recommended sources. I found it an interesting topic for this specific assignment. It's really focused on the basically international revolution as the path to Marxism rather than like socialism as an isolated instance. I want to look at the way that it interacts with the environment, but so far a lot of the readings are so focused around the international nature that I will probably end up doing the futures beyond liberal democracy as well. That's probably my focus.
Okay, you found some resources.
Yeah, although there aren't really any like examples of it being used.
Okay,
so
yes, I mean, be honest.
Yeah.
Okay. Any thoughts in the problem? So you think that it's a pretty very kind of broad ideology, and you think that would be manageable to cover all those 6 elements in relation to that 2500?
Yeah, I think so. It is super broad. Essentially, it follows the same tenets as Marxism or socialism generally, which is a lot to cover. So I might more be focusing on what makes it unique from
Again, yeah, again, having that 6 elements in mind, and one of the purposes of breaking down that general question to 6 little questions is to make even broad subjects like this kind of graph. And so, as far as you can have the strong level values, these are examples, there are these are arguments for and against. And remember, we would like to be critical and reflective. And that's one of the main purposes of the. Okay, I should be mindful of the people on Zoom. I don't know if there's anyone there. Oh, okay, we have 2 people. Jack and Madeline, you guys want to talk a little bit about, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, what topic you have chosen?
I was going to go originally with UBI, but I have a few other assignments that are kind of hedging in really close to the due date of the week 8 stuff. So I was also considering maybe picking a subject from today and rolling with the week 9 due date.
Okay, I can give you a few days if you like. I mean, if that's fine with me.
Sure, I might contact you later about that.
Yeah, okay, yeah, but better to decide as soon as you can, okay?
I will do, yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you so much for letting us know. Madeline, how about you? Can you hear us? Okay, good. Okay, microphone is good. Oh, good. Yes, please email me. Yeah. Okay. How about you, Paul?
I've chosen social democracy and in particular universal basic income. And I found the sources, one is Levin Waldman, the other one is Thompson. I found them very good in picking the 6 elements that we need. But what was lacking in both of those articles was how it could be rolled out and what sort of wage floor use, especially internationally, and the cost. That was a glaring limitation. But I think I managed to compare them quite well and come to a conclusion that gives us some good information on why it's a good alternative, but some of the limitations.
Sure.
And I've already submitted it.
Oh, okay.
Well, the deadline was Wednesday, but that's okay because I had time at this time. So
Yeah, you can rework it without.
no, that's it. I'll ignore my market.
Okay. Good.
I was thinking sort of at the usage question from number 3 talking about eco-socialism, but one thing I wasn't quite sure about with the listings of it is all these subcategories, are those supposed to be related to eco-socialism or ecofeminism?
No, they have their own. That's a good question. I will discuss that.
Okay, but yeah, so we're talking about, I guess you could say the functionality of it is so we can come out with an environment with the environment and everybody's, I guess you'd say priorities and how is it
Okay, and you have found your sources.
just
Oh, good. Yeah, I hope you find them useful enough. Yes, eco-socialism again is not a broad church, but fortunately there are some, the literature is very rich. And yes, there are kind of a slight differences between people who relate themselves to eco-socialism. But you know that there are perspective of eco-socialism in the data for your essay, that would be a very good source. Obviously, if people have enough agreement to come together and write that book together. So yes, even if it's a broad church, but it is manageable. It's very much manageable because it's the ideas around eco-socialism are very well articulated despite the diversity within the camp.
So you recommend just like,
No, that's fine, that's fine, I mean, you can, there are works that discuss about these things and yes, you can just focus on the 6 elements and try to keep on them, wherever you get inside the resources. That should be fine, and then combine them and move on to the rest of it. Yeah, okay, and reflect on these 2 sources that you have chosen in terms of to what extent they cover these 6 elements in your analytical video. Make us familiar with the gist of their ideas, their arguments when you comments to that presentation, and then do a new content from this in terms of the system. Okay,
so I did UBI and I used the 2 articles that you recommended. One was quite short, which I like, this is very important. And then the other one explained a lot about like minimum wage and how like UBI is like the next step, which would be like, it was well thought out, just took a while to get through, this is quite off, but I think they're both very useful. They do the strength and strength and weaknesses.
okay, that's
Yeah,
good, that's
really
good,
well.
you would like,
Yeah,
so such resources are very helpful.
Yeah.
Covered with.
they didn't really like, they said like how it could be implemented, but then like it would just reduce like UBI would be the only like social program. So then when you think like, I don't know, they haven't like talked about like the steps if it was the only social program to exist, like they would reduce, so I did that as a research.
Oh, that's a very good, yes. And also, one thing that we can also address is that some of things are very progressive. But when they are implemented in a context that is hostile to them, they become kind of dysfunctional or semi-functional. But whereas if you adopt them and implement them in a context that is more friendly, like in a socialist society, or social democracy society, therefore they become much more functional and they become part of a more meaningful transition. That's why, for instance, Milton Friedman, the founding father of neoliberalism, actually admires UBI because he thinks, well, that's his handouts finally end up in the hands of the market, the corporations, because people are consumers, he sees them as consumers. And also he is not, of course, he is in favor of downsizing government, the state. So when you do the UBI, universal, you don't attach any conditions to that, it makes it much more manageable in terms of the paperwork and bureaucracy and so on and so forth. So that means you don't need a big government to look after that. Everybody will receive that UBI, including buildings. Okay. Sorry, it was.
Yes, I'm going to take kind of really interesting that started as a certain yeah, it's kind of the fact that it's all about this like composing factors for it seems to be the key thing that kept coming up is that it's only like one of the volume, so set like mindset, like social things, population, and also that because of this quite a large broad framework, it needs to be implemented with other
Very good. Yeah. Thank you so much.
I'm also I use resources from this. I'm consulted with you.
Oh, yes.
I do want this.
Or less, yes, sure.
And
So you're satisfied with the two?
I want this to send.
Or is this?
Feminism, naturalists, justice. In the courses and, it's a whole nice, prosperity and families and just interesting.
Yeah, okay, good. There's a bit of a kind of a difficulty with ecofeminism. A lot of the literature is criticism of patriarchy within the capitalist system, and also within the socialist camp. So, but still, again, I think the 6 elements will help us to pinpoint those aspects of ecofeminism and this. Regardless, yes, yeah, that would be a little bit maybe. But they possibly some of them don't see that as a leadership because they don't want to keep movements. One that will emerge as a result of the resistance and protests and movements naturally, organically, rather than operating groups. And that could also be maybe a strength on their own. Okay, look, it's in my
So I'm doing eco-socialism. I haven't really read enough of the sources, but I've started to very clear understandings of capitalism and sustainability and its use of resources. So I haven't come up to the sources. I've put in the Routledge handbook about schools.
just one chapter after that.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't read through it yet.
Yeah, maybe the chapter that is more introductory. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you so much.
My name is, and I haven't switched what I was on to like, civil response, but I do have. There is something that I can sign. I really understand this.
Okay. Okay. Well, I hope this session will help you guys to more certain decision. Anyone else? Someone? No? Good. Yes. I possibly covered a number of my slides already. Yeah, I mean, we have a list of potential case studies or subjects that we can cover, but only one, just one per assignment. Similar to the previous topics on alternatives, as you can see, we can divide the alternatives in between 2 camps: the reformist ones, the ones that try to work within the system and fix the system, and the ones that are, I wouldn't call them radical maybe, but perhaps transformative, although some of them are truly radical. They are more foundational. They want to change the system itself, or at least some of the very basic foundational aspect of the system they want to change. Among the reformists for this genre, for this type of alternatives, the eco-centric one, the one that emphasize on the centrality of ecological aspect of life, we can refer to examples like circular economy. So if you choose circular economy, that's just one subject. I know there was a lady here who was interested in that. Sustainable development is mostly for global south. It's used to be a very progressive idea in the 70s, 80s, emerged as a result of the very famous report on the limits on the growth. They realized that growth cannot be limitless. We discussed that famous report in one of our previous sessions. And then unfortunately that idea, when it was adopted by the elite, especially center left, the so-called progressives, It was watered down, toned down, co-opted, and now the UN has developed those sustainable development goals, and they are pretty kind of well adopted all across the board by many countries. But again, many of such goals are finding themselves in hostile situations in the context of new liberalism. On the one hand, we want to emphasize on economic growth, on the other hand, we want to maintain sustainability, and these two things seem to be very contradictory. A lot of these people who favor sustainability or sustainable development, they believe in the possibility of green economy. It's another, you can consider it as another alternative, another case, but a lot of them also advocate green economy or green growth. They think that they can decouple growth from, for instance, climate change. We know that so far our historical records show that the more economic growth you have, the more your ecological profile is going to be ugly. The advanced societies have a much poorer ecological footprints. So the argument is that possibly we can ecologize modernism. So ecological modernism is another name that again underpins that, and the idea of decoupling, that we can actually decouple growth from ecological records or damages. You may remember that we discussed this already, that one of the contradictions of capitalism, because it's very much inherently growth oriented, the profit motive and so on and so forth. If you either grow or you die, that's the genetic code embedded in capitalist system. These people say no, actually we can modify the genetics of the DNA of capitalism. We can decouple growth from that. So the contradiction of cutting trees versus cutting jobs, either cut jobs or you either cut trees, it can be overcome. We can create more jobs. We can go for greater growth, economic growth, by saving trees. How about that? You print more money, or you borrow more money, or whatever. You tax the super rich. You use that money to save trees, create jobs for people to save trees, for instance, just metaphorically. But we know that capitalism cannot make money out of saving trees. So you have to have a kind of a state or government-backed system that feeds on taxing the so-called engines of growth in order to fund the reservations and in order to fund the projects that help us protect the environment. Again, you will find yourself dependent on economic growth in order to fund those projects. And economic growth again means that the capitalists should have the upper hand. Should be the drivers of the system. So there's a pretty interesting debate, about that. Green New Deal, like UBI, is kind of a program. It's a policy program. It's a policy change, and it's not a systemic change. But again, it can be addressed. It can be studied as a case, an alternative case. Can be part of the bigger picture, of the bigger puzzle, a piece of the puzzle, contribute to the transition, again, depending on the context, if the context is hostile to it or not. It has its own advantages and also weaknesses like the other ones, considering that it's a pretty narrow policy oriented. But many people argue that if we can achieve that New Deal, that could still be a significant achievement in the context that we are actually dealing with climate urgency and so on and so forth. that would be a bit of an achievement. My personal position is not against these reformist things, but I see them very inadequate. If especially the current situation doesn't indicate that the system even is flexible enough to allow us to go for this reformism. We used to say that let's be realistic, you can't really overthrow the system, and let's go for something that can be managed pragmatically or practically. But even that has become almost impossible. There's been multiple attempts in multiple places in order to push for Green New Deal, but a lot of them have failed because there is a huge resistance. Unfortunately, the influence of money into the politics is so huge, it's so powerful that even doesn't allow reformism to happen. When you find yourself in this situation, you normally see that the voices of the more radical movements become stronger and more colorful. Now you have the two options of a far-right radicalism or a far-left radicalism. But again, that doesn't mean that reform and radical change are totally negating each other. Now you possibly remember from the history that I think it was Martin Luther King was going to have a campaign somewhere, and Malcolm X joins him and goes to that city, and he gives him a message and says that Martin is much more radical. Martin Luther King after the other side of the face. Malcolm says that the reason I'm here is not to sabotage your campaign. The reason I'm here is to show them the system. And if they don't accept your peaceful solutions, the other the downside is that they have to deal with violence. And it worked. Actually, it worked in the history. So there are many moments where actually reform and radical change, despite appearing opposite to one another, they work like the two sides of the scissors. They move against each other, but they cut through. Condition that there's an awareness, there's an agreement between the two sides. Okay, and here is the list of the ones that go a little bit deeper than reform. Degrowth is pretty kind of very radical in the context of capitalism, which is very much growth-oriented kind of economic system. The term post-growth, I'm not really much in favor of that because it's a little bit vague. Is that about degrowth, no growth? What is it that? So it's a kind of a broad church. But degrowth, the literature is rich enough about degrowth. They use the term degrowth, so you can definitely focus on that. No growth, a steady state economy is another camp. Close. There are big overlaps, but they're not identical. Again, the steady state economy or no growth has its own literature, and you can focus on that, and you can also highlight the overlaps. But I would recommend just focus on degrowth because it's the literature around that is very well articulated and it's fast growing. And green localism is again another broad church, but there are some good sources. You can go as broad as green localism. In that case, you may also need to search for ecological localism or eco-localism or eco-localization or ecological localization. You see, there's a constellation of terms used in the literature. Makes it a little bit difficult, and challenging in terms of detecting the right sources, but it's still manageable. There have been some people who have done some good essays on that, or you can simply just go for eco-villages. There have been people working on that as well. They wrote their essays on eco-villages, or permaculture is a pretty strong movement. It's been a pretty strong movement, well studied. Yeah, you can focus on these narrower examples that can be located within the camp of green localism, and you can just briefly say, well, eco-villages is a kind of is an example of green localism, and then just write your essay on eco-villages. Okay. It's vibrating. Sorry, guys. Eco-socialism, yes. Again, as I said, is another broad umbrella, but fortunately the essay is it's so sensitive. Yeah, it's the literature is good. It's manageable. Eco-Marxism. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. Yeah, I think it would be a little bit difficult to. That's why I guess possibly I haven't put that there. Ecofeminism is also very good. Very good. Again, I'm happy to help if you're struggling with finding good resources. I have already listed some. I hope they're not that old. Energy democracy is again another one. The emphasis on the importance of democracy, that the lack of democracy has resulted in the situation we are. If we improve and strengthen our democratic profile, therefore we are in a better position to address our ecological problems and overcome the systemic issues. Ecological or green anarchism is a little bit again difficult. The literature may not be very easy to find. Ecological democracy, again, it's another camp. You may say energy democracy is part of ecological democracy, but we've got a very interesting handbook, a Routledge handbook on energy democracy. If you're interested, I can share that handbook with you in case you're interested in this one. Climate justice is a movement, possibly maybe not a good idea. Food sovereignty is a good one. Amanda, who is marking your assignments, she did a very good job. She wrote her honors on food production, home food production, and she looked at that case through the lens of food sovereignty movement. And the question was that how these experiences and practices would amount to or relate these the people involved to the movement of food sovereignty. Some people might be interested and just have listed that there, but only just one, only one. And again, if you have any doubts about if you are choosing the right one, just let me know. Again, the 6 elements, and remember that I have crossed that bit in the 6th element, the 6th question, the communist framework. I have discussed that with you. If you adopt the idea of the communist framework, it's fine. I'm making it now optional. But the main parts of the question remains, which is finally evaluate the capacities or constraints of the alternative, the case study, the case, to ultimately replace capitalism. Can this alternative replace capitalism? It can be part of transition beyond capitalism, what ways, and so on and so forth. I think that's not too difficult after you address all of these, especially, for instance, the number 2, that you differentiate between your alternative and neoliberal capitalism. You shouldn't find it too difficult to answer the 6th question, and possibly the 6th question can be your conclusion. Actually, that can be you can answer that as part of your conclusion, reflecting on the totality of the alternative and its capacity to help us move beyond capitalism. I have discussed all of this, I believe. Yes, and these are the resources that I have also. Again, yes, this is the communist framework. Again, you don't need to refer to that. I have published a couple of things about this, but I'm not expecting you to reference them or use them. They're kind of sophisticated. They're not written for. They possibly might be useful for postgrad discussions, but not at this stage. So the main idea, again, to remind you, is that we divided the socio-ecological life into four fields: the economy, the ecology, the community, and the politics. Again, this is a kind of an analytical division, of course. Life is so intertwined, and that's why you see these arrows. they are to emphasize the fact that these four fields are very much intertwined. And then in each field we have 4 processes. So 4 fields, 4 processes. We know, for instance, the economy is where the exchanges of goods and services and possibly ideas and those sort of things happen. And the assumption is that as the result of these exchanges, we will have kind of the process would be the equalization of the opportunities for everyone. The assumption is that there's no monopoly and so on and so forth. Many people, when they talk about economy, of course, they talk about equalizing the socioeconomic status of the people. That's an important matter. That's an important issue with the economy. But we know that economy is not an isolated field. It's not an isolated aspect of life. It's so intertwined with the ecological, with the communal, and with the political. And as the result of that, the economy also needs to be democratized, needs to be ecologized, made greener or sustainable, if you like, or as eco-feminists say, self-sufficiency instead of sustainability. And it needs to be socialized. The same you can say about the politics and so on and so forth, because again, they are so intertwined. They also need to be, if the politics is about democratization, it should also be about ecologization. It should be ecologized, it should be equalized, it should be socialized. Now, one thing that you can do, you can, for instance, think of, for instance, UBI. Where would you locate that? Think of circular economy. Where would you locate that? Think of degrowth. Where would you locate that? Let's think of circular economy. Where would you put that in that map? It can be used as a map. You locate your alternative, then you see what the alternative is more specialized, what are the strengths of your alternative according to this framework, and what are the weaknesses. So think of circular economy. Circular economy is about recycling, making sure that the stuff that we use can be reproduced again, and so on and so forth. Where would you put that?
Probably in the ecological and economic as well.
Yeah, it's more, you can place it in the economy, and it's about the ecologization of the economy. We want to make the economy more sustainable, right? But a lot of people who push for that, they find themselves, they face obstacles. And what are those obstacles they normally find themselves dealing with? What other changes they need to push for in order to make their cause, in order to achieve their goals?
Along these lines?
Yes.
Well, there's not much prioritization, democratization.
Yes, that's right. So if they don't democratize economy, imagine the economy is democratized, the workplaces are democratized. That would help them to actually achieve their goals in terms of the circular. When it comes to the politics, if the politics is not democratic enough, they find themselves swimming against the current, right? So you see that they are so intertwined. So you can reflect on that. You don't need to address all six processes and 6 fields, but you can say, well, this alternative seems to be strong when it comes to ecologizing the economy, but you need to have a policy setting, a politics, a political environment that would help the movement to achieve their goals. Therefore, this movement may benefit from, for instance, working with other movements that push for more democratization. I will play something, a debate between, today we have sometimes, a debate between a guy who, again, this, I think I have covered this last week. This is the website, the Commonwealth. You can go there, you can go to the multimedia and find some of the presentations. Hans the advocate for democratic eco-socialism, gave a speech in 2018 at a symposium that we run. And that's an interesting one. I have shared that with you on Canvas and also here. If you go to our website, the Commonalts, if you go to the publications, again, as I showed you last week, we have 2 published essays from previous years. One is on degrowth, the other one is on UBI, and they're very good jobs. They are a little bit above HD because they submitted for peer review. They are peer reviewed. You can do that as well. If you receive the D+, which means 82+, for your essay, please consider that as an open invitation. I would really appreciate if you consider submitting your work. You revise it according to the comments you received on your essay, and then you submit it to me, email it to me. I'll send it out for a review. I mean, if you have achieved 82+, you shouldn't, get too much feedback. And then again, a bit of a revision, and it will go online. It will help. I mean, these people accepted to share their essays here, publish them, and they are helpful in terms of giving us some good ideas about what to do. Okay, this was written by Claire about degrowth. It's relevant to this week. And if you read it to the end, you'll see how she has structured the work. Towards the end, she takes a critical reflection on degrowth and so on and so forth. The 6 elements, you can see them in her writing, but she has decided, and that's okay, of course, she has decided to combine a few of them under one subheading, under one heading. You don't need to divide your essay in 6 sections. It will be too short for each section. Okay, this one is very interesting. This was a debate I just a few days ago I detected on YouTube, and this is a debate between Jason Hickel and Sam Fankhauser. I think he is from he must be Swiss, from Switzerland, mediated by Kate Raworth. Kate is the author of this book, Donut Economics. It's a very famous book. It attracted a lot of attentions, and some cities have adopted this. And the metaphor of the donut is that the inner circle is where we have to satisfy our basic needs, and the outer circle is the Earth system boundaries that we shouldn't cross. And unfortunately, in many advanced societies, we have already crossed the outer boundaries, the limitations, the limits, the ecological limits. Unfortunately, that makes it for the global South very difficult to achieve their basic needs. So in some places, the problem with this model is that in some places, as the result of overproduction and overconsumption, in other places, the outer circle is inside the inner circle. So it's very difficult to work within the ecological limits because those boundaries have already been passed in other places. But anyway, it's a very interesting book. If you sometime later you're interested in such topics and you want to do improve your knowledge or do something, a little project on that, this would be a very good book. But Jason's book, he says himself that he used to be a green growther, in favor of green growth, but he has changed his idea and he has become a degrowther. And Less is More is a very famous book. Again, if you're interested in that book and you're struggling finding the full text, let me know. I can share it personally with you. But this debate is a very interesting one. We can play only the bit where he talks. Prior to him, Sam talks about green growth. I think these debates possibly could make sense if they were happening in the 70s, to be honest, my personal view. It's a little bit too late. I think Jason is right. I think we should go for degrowth but again, that's my personal view. Yeah, it's an interesting. But again, after first Sam talks, and then Jason talks, and then Sam criticizes him. And I think it's very interesting, at least, to for people who advocate for degrowth to also face the challenges that guys like Sam pose on them, and be more prepared in to answer such questions, such criticism. Okay, but before I play that for a bit of a discussion here, again, this is I'm sharing with you here and on Canvas. This is Hans Behr's presentation. You're familiar, one of the pieces of reading, if you may remember, I think it was week 5, was or was it week 6 anyway, was about his idea about capitalism and climate change. Here he joined us 2018 in our symposium and gave a presentation about ecological democracy. A brief summary of his ideas. You can also find a chapter in the Routledge Handbook of Eco-Socialism, because he considers himself as an eco-socialist, written by him. But a summary of his ideas is also presented here. I'll play that before I play that debate. Again, I'm sharing with you a number of short but very interesting introductory presentations of degrowth here for you with you. If you haven't decided yet, maybe you find this interesting. There is I also found criticism of green growth, or eco-modernism, if you like. They are also interesting, if you can mix a bit of an entertainment, they are kind of graphic and interesting. These YouTubers do a very good job, good on them. They must have done courses like this. Anyway, but they make our job much easier. But there's a lot of rubbish on YouTube, of course, and misrepresentations as well. So I have spent some time, to be honest, trying to find the ones that correspond to what we do here. And there's less misrepresentation. This 3-part series on green growth, very interesting. And the person who does that actually draws on some academic work and shares the links to those academic work underneath his YouTube's videos. So I recommend them. If you have some extra time, you can sacrifice one of those bullshit Netflix things, and watch a few of these. They are very interesting. If a friend is inviting you to watch something on Netflix, you can say maybe after the semester. I have much more interesting things to watch. Okay. On ecofeminism, again, it was difficult for me to find something useful. These two, the first one, the guy who does that, he does a very good job in relation to many other subjects, but I think that wasn't very strong. The criticism of ecofeminism that he presented there is pretty old. Yes, ecofeminism started from the global north as an ideology, and the main advocates of that were white, middle-class, educated women. But now it's all over the place, and you can say that many movements on the ground in India, in Africa, by women with ecological health and well-being concerns are practically, without naming themselves as ecofeminists, are practically doing ecofeminism. Vandana Shiva, I believe most of you are familiar with her, is one of the founding figures, one of the leading figures of ecofeminism in the global south. Maybe that lady does a better job, but this is Ariel Saleh, a friend of mine and a founding mother of ecofeminism. Again, we had people who did their honors on ecofeminism, or they looked into permaculture through the lens of ecofeminism and the status of women in permaculture movement, and how central they are or how marginalized women are in permaculture. And in this one, I chose this one because Ariel, after a bit of a talk about her personal journey into ecofeminism, into politics, she talks about the principles of ecofeminism very well. She is super active, even if she's retired, she's super active. She's been writing, massive books, big books, and very, very sophisticated, I would say. So if you're interested in ecofeminism, Ariel Saleh is one of the great thinkers you may want to listen to or draw on. Okay. On energy democracy, ecological democracy, it's a constellation of interrelated terms. The idea of Earth democracy is put together by Vandana Shiva, and of course herself being ecofeminist. You may enjoy these 3 videos, and this is her book. And also we have a Routledge Handbook of Energy Democracy. If someone is interested in this topic, I'm more than happy to share the full text with you. Let's then watch a couple of those things. On eco-socialism, okay. Let me go to
Homegrown, fields sown.
Up north.
South.
Yeah, that was very short. So what do you think? What did you get from that?
The contradiction of capitalism sort of playing against values, like
Yeah, he started with talking about some, that was the summary that he had. You know, the difference between eco-socialism and capitalism, which is the second element. And the issue of, you highlighted the issue of state violence that was not just coming from the Soviet Union. You know, the capitalist system has its own ways of expressing you know, violence. And the ecological record is poor and so on and so forth. And then we made a very short argument about that now. We need an alternative. But in terms of the theory of change, he says that we don't need to wait for the revolution to happen. We can push for some meaningful changes, but not to reformism. If you may remember, we used the term non-reformist reforms. We build up grassroots movements to push for stronger changes. You may even end up building new alternative political parties that would advocate for those significant changes. And then he's fine with some meaningful policy reforms and so on and so forth. Again, we may consider that as a strength or a weakness. That depends on our position. But his theory of change is that you know, we don't need to wait until the revolution happens. What else do you pick up? Well, you remember from last week, Richard was talking about democratizing workplaces, and he said, I'm micro, I'm not macro. But obviously, Hans a lot of eco-socialist stuff. And he's just one figure, one works in the eco-socialist camp, of course. They are not in favor of just limiting themselves to micro changes, workplace matters. They want to also change the system and make the system more democratic and so on and so forth. And if you maybe you pick up on the idea of the socializing the economy, that the economy should still become more democratic and so on and so forth. So eco-socialists, because they're very broad, kind of, you know, they have a broad view and overview, world view. They tick a lot of boxes in terms of communism. The communist framework. They are active in the economy, they are active in politics. You may remember again very, very briefly, he was talking about changing the culture, consumerism, moving away from consumerism. So they are also active in the area of culture, literature, aesthetics, and so on and so forth.
Capitalism isn't just an ideology.
Well, between reform and revolution, people like him. Again, there could be people in eco-socialist camp that are very revolutionary. Trotskyists could also be eco-socialists, but these people normally say, well, we embrace reform as far as it's possible. We wait for the revolution, we pave the way for the revolution, but we don't need to limit ourselves between these two camps. They talk about evolution. So their approach is evolutionary, changing the basics, pushing for the change in the basics, in the foundations. How would you do that? It's a $1 million question. But considering that the system is failing us from their point of view, we are not in a position of making ourselves handicapped by attaching ourselves to just one strategy. I mean, the communist framework does not require everyone to become specialized in every aspect of change, but it would require people to work across their differences. Okay. Now that was a little bit about eco-socialism, and that was a little bit too short maybe and too fast. But let's then listen to a bit of that debate. Again, this may remind us of the debate we had we watched last week. But this is between a guy who is a person who is in favor of degrowth and a person who is in favor of green growth.
Vision problems. Try this simple ice hack with water before bed. Every human has around 106 million cells in their eyes. These.
Okay, enough for eyes. Okay, yeah, first the green growther talks, and then Jason Hickel talks. Yes. Let's see what he has to say. Again, if you're interested, you may use pen and paper or your laptop to maybe take note of the sixth element if that works for you. Or we can, after watching this, we can...
For which I'm going to turn to Jason to set out his perspective. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Is it okay if I stand?
Absolutely, go for it.
Just so I can
wherever
read it
you
better.
would like to.
And we'll have a chance to respond to points made by Sam later.
Absolutely,
Okay.
but you can respond now, or you can set out your perspective.
Whatever you
and
think
can
is
respond
best.
After. Whatever
I'll talk first
Whatever
then.
you like. Give us the degrowth perspective.
I shall.
Rather than just.
And let me take water. Okay, it's so good to see you all, and thank you for coming, and greetings to all of you who are following online. So let's see, this is very challenging because this is a big and difficult topic that I have to now present in 10 minutes, which is hard, but let me try. We stand at a difficult juncture in history. To quote Antonio Gramsci, the old world is dying and the new world is struggling to be born. So let's start with the old world. The global economy is driving dangerous ecological breakdown. With existing government policies, we're headed for 3.2 degrees of global heating this century, within the lifetimes of present generations. Humans have never lived on such a planet. Scientists warn of severe displacement, crop yield decline, species extinction, and political upheaval. And climate is not the only crisis that we face. We're also overshooting 5 other planetary boundaries, including a staggering collapse of biodiversity. This is not because of ignorance, or individual behavior, or a lack of concern. It is due to structural features of the capitalist economy. And by capitalism here, I do not mean markets and trade and businesses. These existed for thousands of years before capitalism, and they're innocent enough on their own. What distinguishes capitalism from other economic systems is that it is organized around and dependent on perpetual growth, ever-increasing levels of industrial production. It's the first and only intrinsically expansionary economic system in history. If it does not grow, it collapses into crisis, which happens, of course, every few years, with devastating consequences for working class people and the poor. This system is profoundly unstable. Crucially, also, capitalism is undemocratic. Decisions about what to produce and how to use labor and resources are controlled by the 1% who own the majority of corporate shares and who appoint the directors of firms. And as far as they are concerned, the purpose of increasing production is not primarily to improve people's lives or to achieve specific social goals. It is not about use value or social progress. Rather, for them, it is to extract and accumulate an ever-increasing quantity of profit. That is the overriding objective. And this leads to perverse forms of production, such as SUVs instead of public transit, or gadgets designed to break down and increase product turnover. The result is that we have an economy that massively overuses resources and energy, and yet remarkably, nonetheless still fails to meet basic human needs. It is dangerously inefficient. Now, scientists are clear that it is the rich economies of the global north that are overwhelmingly responsible for the ecological crisis. Their use of energy and resources is extremely high and vastly in excess of what we know is required to meet human needs even at a good standard. What is more, growth in the global north relies on a large net appropriation from the global south. This is draining poor countries of resources and energy necessary for development, colonizing their atmosphere and ecosystems, and offshoring the social and ecological costs of growth onto vulnerable communities. And yet note that despite this immense production and appropriation, In the US, which is the richest country in the world, a quarter of all people live in substandard housing. Half cannot afford healthcare. In the UK, we have 4.3 million children living in poverty. Why? It's because the enormous productive capacity of these countries is organized in the interests of capital rather than in the interests of people. So what do we do? What does the new world look like? For 50 years, our ruling classes have promised that green growth will save us. They say that efficiency improvements will allow capital to continue increasing production and profits, while at the same time reducing ecological impact to sustainable levels. It sounds nice, but of course it hasn't happened. And now scientists are challenging this narrative on empirical grounds. Let's start with emissions. We know, of course, that it is possible to absolutely decouple GDP from emissions. If that wasn't possible, we'd be doomed. And this happens by shifting to cleaner energies. Indeed, several nations are already on this path. But what we face here is a question of speed. To meet the Paris Agreement target, we have to cut emissions in half in 7 years and reach zero by 2050. And remember, that is a global average target. Rich countries must decarbonize faster than this, since they've contributed most to cumulative emissions. That's a basic climate justice principle. This requires a rapid rate of mitigation. And growth makes this task extremely difficult. The reason is because more production means more energy demands, and more energy demands makes decarbonization harder to achieve. It's like trying to run down an escalator that is accelerating upward against you. Green growth proponents know this problem, and they deal with it in several ways that are apparent in the green growth scenario models. First, they assume efficiency improvements big enough to achieve an unprecedented decoupling of GDP or production from energy to an extent that is not supported by the empirical literature. And the main problem here is that in a growth-oriented economy, savings from efficiency are leveraged to expand the process of production and accumulation, thus wiping out many of the gains. The second feature is that these green growth scenarios assume a mass deployment of speculative negative emissions technologies, mostly in the form of BECCS, which stands for bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, right? This would require biofuel plantations up to 3 times the size of India, with substantial deforestation, biodiversity loss, and constraints on human food systems. So you solve one crisis while exacerbating others. Moreover, BECCS is unproven at scale. And if it fails, we're stuck in a hothouse trajectory from which it would be impossible for us to escape. This is a dangerous gamble with the future of human civilization and all of life on Earth. Third, green growth scenarios maintain excess energy privilege in the global north and among the rich by suppressing energy use in the global south and by appropriating southern lands for biofuel plantations. That's built into these models. This approach perpetuates colonial inequalities. It is clearly immoral and unjust. Finally, even if we imagine these problems away, we have to deal with another issue. Regardless of the type of energy that we use, more growth means more material extraction, which is the single biggest driver of biodiversity loss and ecosystem damage. Several major scientific reports in recent years have found that sufficient reductions in material use are unlikely to be achieved if growth continues as it is in rich nations, even in high efficiency scenarios. This is not good enough. We can and we must do better. In our vision for the new world, we must be attentive to scientific evidence and insistent on global justice. In its latest report, the IPCC points out that scholarship in degrowth offers an alternative. Now, some people will quickly assume that degrowth is somehow anti-technology. This is not accurate. In fact, degrowth embraces efficiency improvements and feasible and safe technological change. But it recognizes that this alone is not enough, and therefore also calls for rich nations to transition to a post-capitalist eco-social economy, abandon growth as an objective, and focus instead on equity, sufficiency, and human well-being. We need to recognize that when it comes to well-being, it's not aggregate production that matters, What matters is what we are producing, whether people have access to essential goods they require, and how income is distributed. This focuses the mind on what is important. And the first step is that we need to decommodify and expand essential public services, healthcare, education, housing, public transit, energy, water, internet, nutritious food. Mobilize the productive forces to ensure that everyone has what they need to live a good life, regardless of fluctuations in aggregate output. This stabilizes the economy, directly cuts the cost of living, and improves the welfare purchasing power of income. Second, introduce a public job guarantee with workplace democracy and living wages to empower people to participate in the most important collective projects of our generation, building renewable energy capacity, insulating homes, restoring ecosystems. This approach abolishes economic insecurity, improves the bargaining power of labor, delivers high levels of well-being, and enables us to pursue radical climate action without anyone getting hurt. This is the bread and butter of a just transition. In other words, we need to improve socially necessary sectors. And with this foundation in place, we can then scale down socially less necessary forms of production. Private jets, SUVs, air travel, mansions, beef, fast fashion, single-use packaging, advertising, and obviously the widespread practice of planned obsolescence. In other words, forms of production that are organized around capital accumulation and elite consumption, and which are largely irrelevant to human well-being. As part of this, we can of course also introduce policy to extend product lifespans and guarantee rights to repair. If our products last twice as long, we will consume half as many. Right? Next, we need to curtail the purchasing power of the rich using policy tools such as wealth taxes and maximum income ratios. This may sound radical, but think about it. It is irrational and unjust to continue to devote energy and resources to supporting an over-consuming class in the middle of an ecological emergency. Now, this is powerful in terms of climate mitigation, because policies like these would dramatically reduce energy use and allow us to achieve a much faster transition to renewables. And as our society requires less aggregate production, we can shorten the working week, give people more free time, and share necessary labor more evenly. This approach has been shown to have a strong positive effects on health, mental well-being, and gender equality. Finally, the central pillar of degrowth scholarship, economic democracy. Democratize workplaces, democratize public services, democratize the media. We know empirically that when people have democratic control over production, they choose to use resources more wisely. They focus on what is required for human welfare, and they sustain ecosystems into the future. Radical democracy is the antidote to a socially and ecologically destructive economy. It should therefore come as no surprise that core degrowth policies happen to be wildly popular. Universal services, a job guarantee, working time reduction, living wages, an economy focused on well-being and ecology rather than growth. Polls and surveys repeatedly show strong majority support for these ideas, and official citizens' assemblies in Spain and France recently have called for the very policies that I've mentioned. With this path, we can build a more efficient, more rational, more just economy that is capable of ensuring good lives for all with less energy and resource use. People often say that 1.5 degrees is dead. There's no feasible path to sufficiently rapid decarbonization. But this is only true if we assume continued growth in rich countries. If we liberate ourselves from this assumption, then 1.5 degrees is back on the table. Models show that with a post-growth, post-capitalist transition, we can achieve our ecological goals and improve social outcomes at the same time. It is technologically feasible, ecologically coherent, socially just, and anti-colonial. That is a future worth fighting for. And fight we must, because none of this will happen on its own. It will require an extraordinary struggle against those who benefit so prodigiously from the existing structure of the economy. But so has every struggle for a better world. Thank you.
If you're interested in this topic, or especially if you're writing your essay on growth, you want to watch the rest of that. The beginning that we skip and also the rest of it. I think that was a very interesting one. Also, a few months ago, maybe 4 months ago, he did a presentation on post-capitalism that you can easily find on YouTube and listen to. But yes, his book is also very interesting piece of literature. What do you think? What are the interesting things that we possibly noted, or anything that you think is he was failing to make a case for? Maybe? Yes. Let me find a microphone.
So I think he did a good job of outlining some core principles of degrowth while contrasting it with the current capitalist system.
Yes.
So it addresses points 1 and 2 very well. He also talked a lot about the strengths of eco-socialism and its capability to address like ecological challenges and also things like some variety of social justice.
Yes.
But at no point does he address weaknesses, or is he critical of eco-socialism? So it fails on.
You mean degrowth?
Oh, degrowth. Yeah,
yes,
sorry.
Yes, that's fine. Yeah, very good. Thank you so much. That was a very good one. Yes. Yeah, you're right. Yes. But yeah, if you listen to the rest of that debate, you know, that's very interesting because he's been a little bit challenged. For instance, the other guy tells him that you would also prescribe your degrowth for the global south, and he says no. He thinks that global south still needs to grow. But again, you find overlaps between what he says and eco-socialism. He is a degrowther, but he's also eco-socialist. You could actually pick up on that. You know, he insists on social justice, democratization, and so on and so forth. A lot of degrowthers are not like that, especially the early ones. They were all in favor of downsizing, but they were not really mindful of. But he did a very good presentation of what he means by capitalism. He showed that socialistic, Marxistic awareness, and in this way, I think his views inside the degrowth camp overlaps a lot with eco-socialists, and he's aware that degrowth could be a misnomer, an oxymoron, if you don't really challenge the capitalist system, the foundation of the capitalist system. So, but he is not a person who would very kind of explicitly advocate for that. He wants to stay within the under the concept of degrowth and push for that, because he possibly understands that many people would overreact and say, "Wow, it's another Marxist, it's another socialist." So some people are kind of, that's their strategy, hide themselves under these concepts. I'm saying that in a positive way. But yes, the fact that he says the global south should still grow doesn't resonate with me, or it could be just me, because that shows that he still believes in the power of technology, modernism, and developmentalism. Whereas me, coming from an decolonial and post-developmentalist point of view, I think, and especially myself, in reflecting on my past experiences of living in the global south, in the Middle East, possibly we need modernization, especially in kind of Western style, you know. I mean, my hometown, I don't know if I've talked to you about that, but if you come and visit my hometown, Isfahan, it's a very ancient city. 400, 500 years ago, it was a metropolitan city. It was a Dubai of its own time. If you come to the second largest square in the city, you see the bazaar, the market, the ancient market in kilometers. You have to have a guide to take you in and take you out. Even me as a local, I would get lost in. And that was built 400, 500 years ago. the architecture made them independent from burning them fossil fuels or anything. They made the architecture. So you're standing at a point and you talk, and in that mosque, huge mosque, everybody can hear you without any megaphone, without using any weapon. They had public bath that was supplied, they was supplied to a public sewage. So they were getting gas from people's spots to running the meeting. I remember when I was a child, we were asked not to get too close to these sewers because it would just they would, it explode people there. So they used that gas in order to so it was kind of circulating going. So this idea of modernization of this type that we see, which is very different from fossil fuels, as someone from Europe, and there was no other ways of modernizing human civilization. There's absolutely nonsense. Many other civilizations were doing their own ways of modernizing themselves. We don't too much of the picture. And there were slow roads. We would have been completely living in a completely different world if that model of modernization, which grew on the back of colonization, of course, cheapening of the labor, cheapening of fossil resources, starting with coal and gas and oil. It was not global. It wouldn't have been living in a completely different world. And that doesn't mean that we were still living in ages or some. So for me, when these people say, well, the global south still needs to grow on the back of these technological advancements, doesn't really strongly resonate. Maybe yes, in some ways, when it comes to healthcare, medicine, but the local agriculture was fully capable of satisfying the now hunger in the global south is more thing. Many people think that hunger in the global south is because they're not advancing. That's the opposite. It's because they're too modernized, because the lands are taken away from the global farmers, given to Monsanto and then exported. That's the cause of hunger. And even if you go to Deutsche Welle, it's a very interesting TV channel in German. It's like an ABC, they're ABC, German ABC rescuers. And there was a very interesting program that shows in Europe how this mega agricultural production is really the environment, turning the soil into desert. But also they show the places where the local farming, they use microorganisms to enrich the soil. And interestingly, their production has not been affected by climate change. Very interesting. So you can actually preserve and you can also satisfy the if you go for some green localism. Now this broad churches like socialism, Marxism, eco-centric, they also need to adopt some levels of eco-localism. And also not to invest too much hope in modern technology and mass production to mass production as possible. But that's my point of view. That's where we make our first. But yeah, I mean that's a very interesting debate if you're interested. What else you get your attention? Do you think these things making you feel better or more certain about your topics? Okay, good. Yeah.
I feel like there wasn't much discussion of methodology. He did talk about empowering labor and increasing the bargaining power of labor, which kind of looks like a popular movement, like a ground up kind of movement maybe. But explicitly the methodology wasn't really discussed. There was, I think you mentioned convincing, the word convincing, maybe misremembering other nations to get on board with degrowth, which seems very vague, but yeah, otherwise yeah, otherwise I thought it was pretty good. He did mention, like, there was a lot of generally socialist ideas within the growth of workplace democracy, bargaining power, equity, all these kinds of ideas. But interestingly, at the start, he said that he was in favor of like the market, or not in favor of, but thought they were innocent, I think he said, on their own.
Oh, what he said was that was the phenomenon of market, the historical phenomenon of the market. That market's been around perhaps since the first two people, Abel and Cain, exchanged something. Something like that. So that's what he was saying. Yeah, okay.
That's something that I.
Okay, so come back to you. That's fine. Anyone else? Oh, good.
I think it's kind of the same as those things like really hopeful in theory, but then there's these really practical positions. So
Yeah,
it just feels, oh, that sounds amazing, but the reality is that really this is what we think after we can do this.
Yes, that's a very good point. We say every theory of alternative also needs a theory of change. Now, how do we get there? That's a one-million question. And there could be multiple strategies for that. I think, yes, you're right. These people need to think of that. Eco-socialists are a little bit more positive aware of that. So we have them, as you could, understand from the transfer of the presentation. Yeah, but that's a very good. Anyone else? Can you tell us what you're interested in? Economics. Okay, it's very good. Yeah, good to have some people working on that. Very good. And most times as a result of inquiries I've had in the past, because people were really struggling finding good resources, and most have added some resources on this locally. Again, if you're struggling with finding good resources, let me know. There could be many other ones that I have missed. Okay, how about you? Yes, thank you. Well, I'll keep on getting people on Zoom. I hope they're still with us. How about you guys, Jack and Madeline? You're still with us? It's only Madeline. Okay, with the broken microphone. That's fine. Yeah, again, you can email me your thoughts, ideas, concerns, questions anytime. Please do so. Don't hesitate. And don't leave until the last time. Anything else? Otherwise, you can end this session. Thank you. Thank you for the attention. Thank you, Madeline. I'll see you next week.